So welcome to our webinar, Building the PTA Budget. I'm Shauna Straw, the 2019-2021 Leadership Services Director for 9th District PTA and the 2021-2023 Treasurer for 9th District PTA. And I am joined by Danae Sinise. Danae, can you please introduce yourself and get us started?
Hi, I'm Danae Sinise. I'm with Escondido Council. I am on the 9th District Leadership Team, and I am the incoming Financial Secretary for 2021-23 for 9th District PTA. So welcome to Building the Budget. So to get started, here's a list of resources to help you as a PTA officer. We strongly recommend that you review the finance chapter and look at the most commonly used forms in the toolkit. The toolkit contains the procedures and the forms you will be using in your new position. Every officer should have a copy and be familiar with your PTA's bylaws. The insurance guide is mailed in the fall, which is why we need your correct mailing address, but it is also found online. And if you need more help or you're not finding information you need, please contact your council or your district for additional assistance. We may talk about some things today that make you panic a little bit. Please know that we're here to help you if you need more assistance or want to talk through things in more detail. One of the advantages of being a PTA is that there's always somebody to ask for help. So let's talk about the fiduciary responsibilities. PTAs must be fiscally responsible to the members and need to ensure that all financial procedures and laws are followed. This is the responsibility of all members of the executive board. While most PTA members think that there are 3 financial officers, treasurer, auditor, and financial secretary, it is every board member's responsibility to ensure that all assets of the PTA are protected and to ensure that the financial procedures are followed. The assets are more than money. They include the volunteers and the reputation of the PTA. And if you ever see that one of your financial officers is maybe in a little bit of trouble or needs help, please help them. Don't just let them sink. So let's talk about the budget. The budget is an estimate of income and expenditures for a set period of time, usually 1 year. The keyword here is estimate. Circumstances will change and the unexpected will occur. A budget is both your best guess of what will happen and a roadmap to help you move toward your destination. And that would be the goals, the activities, and your programs that your PTA will provide during the year. There will be changes along the way, and that's okay. So the budget should always be program driven and not revenue driven. PTA is not a fundraising organization. If there is too much fundraising, the PTA may jeopardize its nonprofit status. Only raise money to meet annual needs for activities and projects as outlined in your budget. Be a PTA with a purpose. Don't raise money just to be raising money. And actually it helps when you're raising money if you can point to the program that the money will help support. So let's talk about the budget committee. So the president-elect appoints a committee, and typically the treasurer is the chair. You may want some members of old and new boards, and you're going to talk about goals. And so the budget should be based on the goals and the program determined by an assessment of the association's needs. Don't be a WEVA. We've always done it that way. Fresh ideas are important. Even though some things have been successful in the past, just sticking to the same programs and events can lead the PTA to being out of touch with membership. That said, remember that you don't have to stop doing an activity or program simply because it's been done for a long time. If it's still relevant and working well for your school community, keep up the great work. In other words, look at each activity or program on its own merits and how it meets the needs of your members. And this is how to get started. Goals and programs drive your budget. The board-elect meets to decide on tentative goals. You want to meet with the principal. You want to meet with teachers and staff or survey them. In addition, we meet with the librarian, the social worker, the family liaison. All those people have great ideas for things to improve either the community or something that a group of students might need. Involve the association members. I think it's always great to make sure that the association members know that the budget is a living document and can be changed if something new comes up that you decide you want to do in the middle of the year. The committee should meet soon after election to prepare the budget, review the programs proposed by the program committee, including detailed expense projections, review past budgets, income from all sources, and expenditures, estimate probable income from all sources, and balance probable income with probable expenses. Goals, funds, and fundraisers. Compare your tentative goals to the info that you've received. Determine your final goals for the year. Decide what funds you need to meet those goals. Determine what fundraisers will provide the necessary funds. Goals are important, but remember to be realistic. Can you do that activity with the volunteers, funds, time that will likely be available? Does it meet a need in your community? What are the costs versus the benefits? Now that you have your goals or your destination, how are you going to get there? The budget is your roadmap. How much money does your PTA need to raise? How much money will your PTA likely start the year with? What expenses, both for programs and admin, will your PTA have and when? Answers to these questions will help determine both the types of fundraisers to hold as well as when to hold them in the school year. Okay, so this is the budget timeline, and we're going to go through these, but this is where we're going to say, don't panic if you haven't done these exactly as we're going to talk about them right now. So once the preliminary budget has been completed, it must be approved before any funds can be released or spent. Remember, this budget is for the upcoming year. To be able to spend money over the summer, the preliminary budget must be approved at the last association meeting in the spring, and any funds needed over the summer must be released by category or by a motion to pay bills over the summer. If a preliminary budget is not approved in the spring, a motion must be made authorizing a limited amount of funds for the new board to spend over the summer. Over the summer, the preliminary budget will be finalized, and this final budget must be approved by the executive board and presented at the first association meeting of the year for approval. The budget is a living document. The board must review it periodically, and if changes are needed, the association must vote to amend the budget before the board spends in excess of the budgeted amount. The treasurer should present budget versus actual reports to the board and the association at least quarterly. Remember, passing a budget by itself does not authorize money to be spent. Funds should be released at each association meeting for the activities or events occurring before the next association meeting. Budgeted expenses may also be authorized by the board and approved by the association at the next meeting. The board is strictly limited in the amount of unbudgeted funds that may be spent in between association meetings, and each unit's bylaws specify what that amount of money is. Okay, so this is a very cool little chart about if you're allowed to write the check or not. This is a new graphic designed to help all PTA officers determine if proper procedures have been followed before funds are spent. You can find this and other information in the toolkit. So the 3-to-1 rule. Remember, the PTA's mission is not to raise funds. Shauna has dropped in the chat the link in the toolkit for the 3-to-1 rule. PTAs are public charities, and the majority of funds raised need to be spent on our purposes. To help maintain balance between fundraising and programs, we have the 3-to-1 rule to guide you. And so basically that says for every one fundraiser you have, you should be supporting 3 programs. All right, and then Shauna is going to take over from here.
Okay, I'm back. So what should the budget include? And this means, the actual document that you're going to create. It should include carryover funds. And those funds, it's a fancy term for whatever your ending balance was at the end of the last term in all of your accounts. It should be the same number as the ending balance on the annual financial report and the audit balance at year end. So obviously, if you're preparing a budget in the spring, you don't have those final numbers yet. So that's the preliminary budget. If you do approve one in the spring or before school gets out, then that would have your best estimate. And then again, you would bring a firm number to your first association meeting with that budget. The income portion is going to be all of your revenues shown as the gross amount. So for instance, if you sold t-shirts and you bought the t-shirts for $10 and you sold them for $10, you don't say that was zero income. You have to show that $10 of income that you sold it for. Membership income is the unit portion only. You should actually break it down now if you're using totem and manual memberships, so that you show both of those as a separate line item, because the totem portion is just going to be the unit piece. And if you sign someone up manually, you're going to collect all of the parts that you forward to the next level of PTA. And then funds not belonging to the unit for income is where you would put, if you have a manual membership donation or manual membership, you would put that portion that gets forwarded on as not belonging. So you actually separate that out. So if you had a $10 membership and your unit keeps $4.65, that's what goes in the income portion, and then the not belonging is the $5.35, because they are not included in your income, the part that you pass on. It's not your PTA's money. So for expenses, this would be anything that you're paying money for. So each program, each fundraiser should be shown separately. There should be line items for administrative expenses, such as your insurance, any bank fees, printing, postage. If you are using some online app or way to take money in online and you are charged a fee for that. Totem, for instance, has a fee. If you use their donation portion, then you would show that as an expense. The carryover funds for next year is you can do that as a separate line item, or it also can just be whatever the ending balance is projected to be. We recommend at least 10% of your annual budget expenses as a guideline, but some of that depends on what kind of events you do right off the bat at the beginning of the year. The unallocated funds are funds that you haven't decided what to do with yet. And we do have examples of the actual budget. So I can talk about that in a little bit. And then again, the funds not belonging to the unit expense. This is where those funds that you've taken in when you collect a membership, now you should show it going out. And so those two lines should balance. Because if you've taken in money that doesn't belong to you, you should send it on to the next level of PTA. Okay, so here is a very small sample, and I'm going to put the link in the chat to get to the real version of it. So these are samples in the toolkit of both the sample budget and the annual financial report, which is your budget with the year-end numbers that actually happened. But your reports can look different depending on what program, what financial software your PTA is using, if any. You can certainly, as long as the information is contained in the budget, it can look slightly different. I will say if you're using PTEZ, which is all PTAs have access to the document uploading portion and the officer management or roster list, all PTAs have access to that for free. But for a fee of, it's an annual fee, about $100, depending on how much, could be more, depending on how much your PTA grosses. For that fee, you can use the financial side of it, which allows you to, enter in all of your transactions, and then it will create reports that do look like our samples. So that is one of the benefits of using EZ. You can click a button, it will create these reports for you. Okay, so here's a bigger version of half of what I just showed you. I wanted to highlight, so again, the carryover would be this top part, the balance forward from previous year. The income examples, receipts is another word for income. Again, if you had interest on any of your bank accounts, if you, this is the two different lines, if you're taking in totem membership versus manual memberships. If you have straight out donations, and again, that could be asking your families to, round up, give us $50, and then everything above the membership amount is a straight donation. That's if a company gives you a donation, that would be the types of donations. And then you obviously would have income from any fundraisers you do. You might actually have program income as well. If you are doing a movie night that's, to bring the community together, and you sell popcorn, you might actually have some income from a program. And then here is the funds not belonging, receipts not belonging, whatever you call it. And then this is showing the piece that you're going to send on to the next level of PTA, whether that's your council or to 9th District. And then Founders Day is if you are doing a Founders Day event and you ask for, we call it a birthday gift for PTA. And then when you collect that, again, you send it up to the next level of PTA. State PTA uses it for scholarships for high school students, volunteers, teachers. There's some continuing education scholarships and such that state PTA does. So don't forget operating expenses. So we're all about supporting the school and the community, but we also, there are perfectly legitimate expenses that your PTA has as a business. It is the cost of doing business. So it's important to budget for them so that they don't pop up and surprise anybody. And some of these things are so that your board members, your volunteers don't have to fund them themselves. They're already giving their time and their talents. They may not want to give their treasures as well. So it could be financial. If you're paying, for instance, for PTEZ, that would be an operating expense. If anybody needs to buy record keeping materials, I will put in a plug that 9th District has a whole lot of binders right now. If anybody is interested in coming down and stocking up on binders, and this is as of June, but I have a feeling we might have them throughout the summer. And again, attending the different training activities that we have. I will say so, and if you do buy any financial software, please make sure that your PTA actually pays to use it. So that and there are ways to get discounted software. You can use TechSoup, which has a bunch of discounts for nonprofits. So we do ask that you budget for convention. We also like to have you budget for our 9th District activities. We have our annual meeting in March, hopefully in person this year. And we do a huge training and another meeting at the first weekend of June. That's usually about $50 a person. The annual meeting is about $30 a person. The conventions for both state and national are just like when your unit wants to get people to come to your meetings because you need to do business. So you do something interesting for them to come besides listen to the meeting. So that is what state and national do. They provide an important way to gain new skills and knowledge, connect with other PTA leaders, participate in the business of the association, including voting on such things as resolutions, bylaw changes, electing officers. There's usually some sort of a vendor fair at all of these levels, including ours. So we like every PTA to at least budget to try to send at least one delegate to these things. You actually have another opportunity to be part of National Convention virtually this year. So as you can see, next year it's going to be in Maryland. That's going to be a little expensive, but this year you could do it from home. So again, our state convention will be in Ontario next year, so that will not be an outrageous travel cost. There at least won't be flights involved. So you still would have hotels, food, that sort of thing. So those are great things that we'd love to have you budget for so that you can participate in the whole organization and not just your unit PTA. Okay, so hospitality is not one of our exempt purposes, and it may not constitute a substantial activity. So this is a nonprofit requirement from the federal government, and violations can jeopardize your PTA's tax exempt status. So activities may be judged substantial if a significant portion of the association's funds or volunteer time are spent on it. Substantial, they tend to look at that as 5% or more, and those are your actual expenditures. So if you spend $10,000 in a year, then that's only $1,000 of your, I think that's the right, no, it's 20,000 is $1,000. So figure that out. Hospitality includes such things as volunteer and staff appreciation events. You should not be, basically you're not supposed to be throwing parties and doing nothing else. So that is the kind of looking at it that way. If you are doing an event, for instance, if you invite everybody on Friday night to help set up for the carnival on Saturday, and you buy pizzas and sodas for the group because they're working for 3 hours, that's considered part of the event. Same as if you provided breakfast in the morning for your volunteers. So that's part of the event expense and not considered hospitality. But again, it shouldn't be a lavish buffet. It should be pizza and a soda. So again, keep all of that in mind. Again, and your members who are giving money to the PTA or are helping you raise money for the PTA would not necessarily want you to be using their hard-earned money on frivolous things. So make sure you're keeping that in your mind as to how that looks as to what you're providing. So again, this is the expense half of the sample budget. The operating expenses are itemized here. You'll see that the hospitality is actually broken down, but there is a total line item here, and with the caution to not exceed 5% of all of your budgeted expenses. And again, budget as best you can. Now for the insurance premium, we usually let you know that amount in about August. So hopefully that'll be coming soon. And then gift cards. So giving a gift card is the same as giving someone cash. The IRS considers cash gifts, including gift cards and gift certificates, as reportable income on the recipient's tax filings. So giving a volunteer cash or cash equivalent like a gift card on behalf of the organization may cause them to be considered an employee or an independent contractor by government agencies. So quote, and this is from IRS publication 4221, a public charity is prohibited from allowing more than an insubstantial accrual of private benefit to individuals or organizations. This restriction is to ensure that a tax-exempt organization serves a public interest, not a private one. If a private benefit is more than incidental, it could jeopardize the organization's tax-exempt status. So for those reasons, PTA and our policies and procedures have expressly forbid giving gift cards purchased with PTA funds. PTA funds cannot be used to purchase personal gifts for staff or volunteers, such as gift cards. So this is out of the toolkit. But providing a meal to staff or volunteers is considered hospitality, not a gift. And remember that these policies apply to gift or gift cards purchased with PTA funds. Donated gift cards may be given away so long as the donor is aware that their gift may be used in that manner and does not object. So that's our stance on gift cards. It's the never-ending question that we have, because it is a lot easier to do that and figure out other things. And then regarding carryover funds, we obviously don't want you to spend every penny to where the next year's board, next year's PTA has $0 to begin with. We recommend leaving at least 10% in unrestricted carryover funds for the next board, but your PTA may need to change that amount depending on, again, what you have planned in the fall. If you've collected restricted funds, restricted reserves, so those are funds that have been restricted by a vote of the association or by the donor to be spent only for a particular purpose, usually on a particular program or activity. And then unrestricted reserves are anything else in excess of the expenses, which are not restricted. And again, PTA's mission is not fundraising, and neither is hoarding charitable funds. So your PTA should strive to ensure that the majority of funds raised in a given year are spent in that year. If your PTA has unrestricted reserves that exceed a full year's worth of operating expenses, consider whether there are better ways those funds could be used right now. If your unrestricted reserves exceed 2 full years worth of operating expenses, you could be in danger of losing your tax exempt status. So obviously this past year and a half has been very odd. So you could have more money than usual because you didn't run any events. You could have less money than usual because you didn't have any events. So you're going to have to, this budgeting year might be more crucial than ever because you can't just expect it to be the same as last year. So, and again, there could be good and bad in that. It'll require you to be a little bit more creative probably, and maybe come up with some different ideas or embrace some things that you have done in the last year and a half that worked out great, even though they were virtual. Okay, so this is somewhat of a new, we've always been able to get donations of non-cash items. So this is asking for the local grocery store to donate cases of water to your jogathon, or asking for gift cards to make gift baskets at an auction. But the Attorney General now requires that this be tracked. So you actually need to keep track of this. You can do it on a separate spreadsheet or even just on a piece of paper. The most important things to record are what the contributions were, what the value of each contribution is, and usually the donor tells you that, and then which program, activity, or fundraiser the contribution was used for. If the donated item is auctioned off, you need to record the sales price as well. Donations of gift cards and gift certificates should be tracked in the same manner as all other non-cash donations. Even though the IRS considers receiving a gift card to be income for the recipient, they consider them to be non-cash donations for the donor, and thus your PTA must record them in the same way as other in-kind donations. So non-cash contributions or in-kind donations received by your PTA are required to be reported on tax filings. If your PTA files a Form 990 or 990 EZ, which you have to be well over $50,000 in income to do that, but non-cash contributions are reported as part of the contributions, gifts, grants, and similar amounts received. If your PTA files the Form 990N e-postcard with the IRS, your PTA will still have to report the non-cash contributions to the Attorney General's office on the new CT-TR-1 form. So that is really the main reason why, regardless of how much income your PTA has, this reporting to the Attorney General is still going to be required. So it's going to be important to keep track of that. And remember, the IRS requires that a receipt be provided to the donor for all donations of $250 or more, both cash or check and non-cash contributions. Okay, so that was a whole lot of information, and here it is written out. So again, here's your program, possible program expenses, your fundraising expenses. This is this line for your planned carryover to next year. So if that's, you know, $2,000, you would enter that amount in here. The unallocated reserves, again, becomes whatever's left. And so you haven't figured out what to do with that money. And reasons you might have that is that you have a fundraiser that does really well. And so you actually get more money than you planned on. And so then you've got to figure out, it's unallocated until you've figured out how you are going to allocate it. This is, again, showing the money leaving the PTA that does not belong to it. So after you've written it up at the top and said we brought it in, this is where you're going to prove that you sent it back out. And then again, down here, this is this non-cash contribution. So this would be one way to track it. Again, it could be a separate piece of paper. You know, Ralph's gave us 4 bottles of, 4 cases of water, and Starbucks gave us 2 travel carrier things. And so that could just be itemized on a whole separate piece of paper. This is a different type of budget format. Sometimes this is easier for people to see, and actually I should have added this. There's usually a 3rd column. So this is listing the activities as one line, and then you have one column for the income. Can I make it small? Oh, is it being cut off? I can't do that. Crud. I don't think I can do that. Is it the top that's being cut off?
Can't see the totals at the bottom.
I don't really have totals.
Oh, okay.
It is just part of the form. Thank you,
Okay.
Danae. This was just an example of how to, yeah, you'd have the income, you'd actually have a total down here at the bottom. So you'd have a total of all your income and a total of all of your expenses. And then you can do what's called a net column. So then you'd subtract income from, or expenses from income, and that would tell you how you did. So in my t-shirt example, if you had t-shirts on here, spirit wear, here we go, this is a perfect example. So this is my example of you bought the t-shirt for $10 and you sold the t-shirt for $10. So the net over here to the right would be 0. So this format can help your members, your other board officers to see how an event does. Obviously, if it's truly a program, you don't necessarily care that it makes money or how much it costs. As you can see, their fall event has no income associated. It only has costs. So this net would be minus $600. But here they're doing Valentine, the friendship-gram things, and they took in $200 and they spent $100, and then that would be, so their net would be $100. They made $100 on that event. So that can be, I mean, you can do that kind of in your head with the other format, subtracting the bottom from the top. But this is a good way to see, like, should we keep doing this event? We've put all kinds of woman hours, people hours into doing this event. Did we really get anything from it? And maybe it's just, it was fun, so that's fine. But this is a good way to help you kind of see a little bit more clearly how things are doing. All right, so it's part of the treasurer's duty to keep the executive board updated about all income and expenses as they relate to the budget. If expenditures have exceeded their budget amount, a motion must be made to amend the budget, and the association must approve the additional funds before reimbursement can be made. So that's when somebody buys too much stuff for the fall festival. And how are you going to deal with that? If a fundraiser brings in more or less money than expected, the board needs to reevaluate the budget. So again, that's where having a budget with actual amounts to present can be extremely helpful as you make these kind of decisions. Can a fundraiser be eliminated? Can more programs be added? Do we need to drop some programs or add a fundraiser? Should we increase or decrease a budget line? Keep the executive board up to date with a budget versus actual report at least quarterly. If you're using, for instance, PTAEZ or PTEZ, it's very easy to print that report at any moment. So it shouldn't be too hard to give that to your officers. The board should not authorize expenditures in excess of the approved budget. If the budget needs to be increased, the association needs to be consulted and motions made to increase budget line items. Unbudgeted expenditures approved by the executive board that are within the limits set in your bylaws must be ratified at an association meeting and recorded in the minutes. But be careful, if the board approves an unbudgeted expense and the association does not approve it, ratify it, the board gets to make the personal donation to cover the unbudgeted expenditure. So if you're deciding as a board to do something that you haven't already run by your association, be very certain that it's not going to be objected to, because yes, you would be personally liable for that amount. And then remember, a budget is a living document. It will change throughout the year. It is expected, and it means that your PTA is managing your finances well. You don't just set it in August or September and not ever check in. You need to make sure you are staying on the path that you've planned, or change the plan. And again, this is a kind of a close-up on the, this could be what the budget to actual report. It's still just your budget. So this is the budget column. And then this is how much has happened since whatever date of the report. So if this was September 1st, this is how much money has come in. This is the income section for the PTA through that date. And then you can tell, so, you know, obviously this particular report, the donations are doing fabulous, $1,000 over their budget of 200. So that's wonderful. And that's a great reason to change the budget, is now you can up this amount because you know you've already taken in $1,000. Same with corporate donations. This group was killing it. They must have been knocking on everybody's doors. And then, but see, there's no budget amount here. So this should actually be budgeted so that you could tell whether or not these events were within what you had planned. And when you do the annual financial report, which we will start bugging you about in August, that is it's doing this actual column from beginning to end of the fiscal year. So even if you planned $5,000 for t-shirt sales and you still put the $1,500 that you've taken in through the entire year. That report's very important. Not only do we bug you for it, it will help you fill out the tax reports that need to be done. And then it also helps the next budget committee make recommendations on what to do next year. So if you have no clue what happened the last year, then how can you, well, you can certainly plan, but it's very helpful to have some historical information on what happened in the immediate past. And in fact, again, this year, you might want to go back 2 years to see what was happening before everything went upside down. And maybe blend last year with that prior year as to what you can hope for, or what things to carry on. All right, and I think that is it. Haven't had any blinky things come up. Do we have any questions?
There
Any
aren't
other
any questions.
Send you. You coming back with me, Danae?
I'm here. I was saying there aren't any questions in the Q&A.
Everybody's head is, you know, absorbing all of this information.
That's right.
Oh, I have to get to work. It's only June.
So, and some of those timelines may not be things that you've done before, but you can always just tackle them slowly and try to be more on that timeline next year. Sean and I were talking earlier about working over the summer and, doing budgets over the summer. And it's a great way to get to know your board while you're doing that. We do have a question.
Oh, yeah.
If we haven't approved summer spending, how can we move forward?
So again, this would be looking at your bylaws, that amount that you can spend that's unallocated. So if you did not get anything approved before the last meeting, then basically nothing has been allocated for next year yet. And so any money the PTA spent would be unallocated. And so if you look at your bylaws, again, that amount is not more than $1,000. If it might be less. And so then you can choose to spend up to that amount. The other option is you can always call a special meeting. So you need to give your members 10 days notice. You need to make sure you get a quorum. You tell them what the special meeting is for. We need to approve the budget to have a welcome back picnic, which let's hope everybody could do that, but probably not. But that would be, you would present that, send that out to your membership, get at least a quorum probably on a Zoom call, but you might be able to meet in a park. I don't know. You could be creative, could be the school parking lot. I don't know. And that would be another way to approve one or two items. And maybe you don't have the whole budget ready yet. You're just budgeting through September. And again, that might be a good way to operate right now. It's kind of really every couple months. What can we do now? What's working now? Do we have more people on campus? Do we, those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
I see it. We got another one, I think. Oh, board elect or current board. Excellent question. The current board could call a meeting. Actually, the board elect could call a meeting. Well, they should work together if it's before the end of the school year. But as of most of you, your fiscal year begins on July 1st. If that's not your fiscal year, then it's whatever month first you take office. You could call a meeting for 10 days after that and be ready to go. So.
Oh, okay. So now there's a question in the chat. So the members in this school year association can approve the budget on the new school year. Yes,
they actually, all of your members right now are members until October 30th or 31st. Mm-hmm. So for exactly that reason, because you haven't started signing up members for next year yet. And so their membership kind of carries over into the fall. And so they absolutely could do that. And again, this is another reason why you check in with your association. Mm-hmm. Doubt you're going to have a huge turnover in members from one year to the next, but they could get there in September and decide they have different priorities. So, and again, I think that was one of the slides talked about surveying. You could always survey people as to what they feel comfortable about doing, what would they support. I had a room mom once tell me she planned, she wasn't going to do the ask every time they had an event, because every time they were trying to buy something for the month that this teacher was going to do, whatever it needed, pencils, pipe cleaners, whatever it was. Instead of asking over and over, she was just going to ask for, $20 at the beginning of the year. And she laughed towards the end of the year and she said, I got a lot more money when I asked, like every month. So that's something to keep in mind when you're planning activities. Do you do one big bang, or do you spread it out over the year and do a bunch of little things? So it could be both of those.
Yeah. I know some of the units in our area that approve their budget in the spring, they come back and approve the same budget in the fall, but they're ready to amend, because somebody may show up with a new idea, or so you just keep it moving.
Exactly. That is probably that. Don't just create something and set it aside. Make sure you're constant. Yeah. Quite frankly, I do this I got very good at this in my personal life. So my children were sent off to college with budgets. I became entrenched in PTA budgets, and it has affected my whole outlook on things. We plan for vacations this way.
That's right.
my kids would have a budget for vacation. So yes, it's amazing how that can affect your life after you've embraced the world of budgeting.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
Oh, wait.
Oh, here we go. Yep. Does the date on the receipt of the purchase matter to be considered a legitimate expense for a budget line that was approved after the date on the receipt? Does that matter for auditing?
No, and I think what I'm hearing, so I went to the store on June 10th and bought soda. And then maybe we didn't have the meeting until June 20th to approve soda for the event. But as long as it gets approved and then you write the check to reimburse me for the soda, that would be the bigger timeline. And again, it goes back to that graphic of, can I write this check? If you've gone through all those steps and then you write the check. So yeah, it could be, I mean, obviously you don't want really old receipts because that might look strange, but why would I be buying it months in advance, hoping that we were going to use it? But if it's fairly close, then I would think that's okay, unless you have hopefully that answers the question. We have another Q&A thing.
Yep. There is one more question in the Q&A. The association approves the budget, but can we spend before this time for next year? So I'm not sure if I understand the question, that if the budget is approved before the end of the year, you can release funds to spend over the summer.
And again, after, and it does depend on when your fiscal year is. So
Right.
like this year's budget covers it until the end of this fiscal year.
Right.
So even though it's the same membership people, they are approving it for 2 different years. So one is if
Right.
again, we're sitting in June right now, so that would be this fiscal year, and then July is next.
Right.
Your
Right.
budget hasn't been done yet. So, okay, that's operating on the how to get, how do you get it approved between now and when so you shouldn't be spending any money without a budget, ideally. And even if it's just your executive board that's approved it. And then again, either you may need to call a special meeting if you need to spend more money than what's allowed in your bylaws. But that just depends on where that's coming.
Okay, so now she's saying the budget hasn't been done yet. So here's what we used to do at one of our units. If you are estimating the amount of money you're going to have as of June 30th, what we would do was present to the association, here's our estimate for the amount of money we have to start next year. Here's our request for what we need to spend over the summer. And then we would just get those things approved and get those funds released. And then you would come back in August with your full budget ready to be approved.
And we have clarification for the receipt. So
Right.
she said, what about if it's an old receipt from December and you add the new line item today? And this, I was actually thinking this is the only way I can really see this happening as a teacher who tend to come to you with and I'm hopefully there's no teachers watching this, but they tend to come with a pile of receipts. I laugh. It's like the shoemakers kids have really bad shoes. The teacher who wants your child to turn in all of their homework perfectly on time comes to you with a pile at the very last minute and says, hi. Yeah, so for instance, and I could think of an example of this, if you got to May or June and you realize you've done really well with your spring fundraiser, or you didn't do something because you couldn't go on campus, then maybe you had some extra funds. And so then maybe your association decides, okay, we're going to allow, teachers to be reimbursed for classroom expenses up to $100 each because we have these funds and we want to use it on the school today. And then, yes, if they dug up receipts from December that would qualify for that, I would say that's okay. As long, and again, should be in this, so that, and let your board sit and decide that. And then if your association says that's great, then yes, your auditor should find that you have you have met all of the conditions for that particular line item. But yeah, if I don't know, like my soda example, if I had soda from March and I suddenly went, hey, I have the receipt and I'm bringing it to the teacher, appreciation or whatever, the end of school party, then you might decide you want me to go buy fresh soda. I don't know, but, and maybe it's not soda. Maybe it's, I've got paper towels because I bought them all in March because I was still paranoid about paper goods. So I have a whole lot of paper towels that I could essentially be reimbursed for after the fact. That's another scenario I could see happening.
Yeah.
At least right now. Who would have known that paper goods were a thing? You do need to issue, so she said, what if it doesn't classify as a category? You should have a line item that somehow meets that. You can't just reimburse people for random things. So there needs to tie into some category that you've created. And that's, the examples we have, some of them are very specific depending on how many things your PTA does. I've seen budgets where they list every single restaurant night. We've got money from Chuck E. Cheese, who I think went out of business now, but Chuck E. Cheese and Rubio's and McDonald's. And so but at some point, you've got so many of them, you may just want to make that restaurant nights or dine out nights. And then that just becomes a lump category. So you'll know whether your association needs very specific budget line items or whether they can be a little broader. So that would, and does the IRS audit units? I actually was cleaning out somebody's paperwork and found letters from the IRS from 2012 where they had decided to audit that PTA. So I can say I've seen it happen. Now I can't tell you how often, but yes, you should do the best you can to get all of the paperwork you're supposed to be collecting and do these things appropriately. The other important reason is that if you have not followed these procedures, our insurance may not cover you at an event if you have a claim. So if you're running the wonderful Fall Fest and you didn't actually ask your membership, your association, if we can do this, if we can have, whatever, this huge event on a Thursday afternoon, and something happens, the insurance can say, did you follow these steps? So that is the other reason we kind of, not only does it help you be better prepared for your year, if you're paying attention to your budget, it also will allow the insurance to cover you. Now this question again about I don't want to say don't worry about how much money you're carrying over. We do encourage you to spend it on the families and the students that were there when it was raised. That doesn't always happen. So again, there's no magic number that if you've hoarded 51% or you've spent 50.2 or 75% or you haven't spent it, that I don't think the IRS is going to purposely come knock on your door, but they could. And again, you are supposed to be raising money to help the PTA and the school now, not 5 years from now. So do what you can. Maybe cut back a fundraiser if you're carrying over large amounts every year. Maybe get rid of a fund. Maybe do the carnival and don't charge people to show up. Or you charge them, 25 cents for a hamburger or something. You could make it be free. You don't have to have everything be a fundraiser. Depending on the amount, talk to the principal, see if there's some one-time item you could help fund, and gift the money to the school for that thing. Again, you don't want to get into something that you're going to have, hiring teachers can be done, but then that gets you into this perpetual, now we've got to raise money to keep this going. That's why, again, it's not that you can't do those things. We discourage it because it's hard to maintain. And it as a volunteer, it asks a lot of you to work to do that. So there are ways, and again, you know, having a lot, it doesn't seem like that's a bad problem to have, is to have too much money, but again, it can be.
Right.
If you're trying to use it on the kids that raised it and the families that helped contribute to it. So do what you can so that they can see that benefit of, this is why it's so great to have PTA on campus, is because they do X.
Well, and I know this year specifically, we had units who gave away the yearbooks instead of selling them, you know, gave away spiritware instead of selling them. So just make sure that everybody's in agreement as to what you're going to do.
Yeah. And again, don't necessarily feel like you need to start July 1st with very little money. We're not really sure what the next 6 months is going to be. So
Right.
I keep putting this on recordings. I'm very hopeful that everybody is going to come flooding out of their houses to your PTA events, because they are so desperate to help and participate and be part of the school again that you will have to beat them off with a stick. But we'll see if I'm right or not. That is my eternal optimism as to what's gonna happen.
We're all hoping, all
Yes.
hoping we can do that. Yeah.
It has to be better than last year.
That's right. Yep.
Jinx things, and I don't want to do that either.
Yep. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. If you think of something after we're finished, here's how to get a hold of us.
Yes, please email me.
Yeah, we're happy to answer after the fact.
Yeah.
We're happy to meet with boards if you want to discuss something as a group. The Zoom thing is great for that, right? We can meet with anybody in the county.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so, all right. Well, we appreciate you being here and hanging out with us.
And good luck with your summer and the beginning of your PTA year.
Right. All right. Thank you.